They thought it had burned in the atmosphere, torn apart like cosmic confetti somewhere over the Indian Ocean. It was 1985 when satellite NX-01 disappeared from tracking grids, declared lost during a solar flare spike that wiped telemetry across half the sky. It was an old relic even then, a Cold War-era monitoring device meant to scan for nuclear signatures. But 4 decades later, it fell back to Earth like a forgotten memory and landed in the wrong place at the wrong time. The first to find it weren't scientists, they were hikers. A father and son trekking across the Nevada desert, just west of the Groom Lake perimeter, stumbled upon a blackened crater. Inside, a twisted, scorched cylinder of steel and solar plating, steaming from re-entry, partially buried in the sand like a bullet halfway through flesh. And at its center, still pulsing faintly, was a blue diagnostic light.
Alive.
Within hours, the site was cordoned off by military personnel in unmarked vehicles. Satellite NX-01 was loaded into a sealed trailer and driven away without explanation. The official report claimed a meteor strike. But at the Lockridge Aerospace Recovery Lab in Utah, one of America's quietest and most classified research facilities, the truth began to unfold. The satellite was intact. Not fully functional, but not dead either. Panels warped, yes, antennae sheared off, but the internal hard drive was untouched. Not just preserved, but somehow upgraded. Engineers stared at the data ports in disbelief. NX-01 wasn't supposed to carry advanced storage, and yet the internal memory now read as 512 terabytes, a technology that didn't exist when the satellite launched. They powered it, slowly, cautiously. Cooling systems hissed, lights flickered, and then the logs began to play. Grainy footage first, expected weather patterns, cloud formations over continents, solar flares flickering across black space. But then there was more. One clip showed a building collapse in Istanbul. The timestamp read May 6, 2025. That was 3 days away. They dismissed it as a glitch, a date formatting error, until May 6th arrived and the exact same footage appeared on live news. That was when silence fell across the lab. Not disbelief. Something worse. Recognition. What followed were images from cities across the world. Torrential floods in places where skies were now clear. Riots in nations currently at peace. But what caught everyone's breath was one short clip, just 6 seconds long, showing a face. A woman, early 40s, lab coat, glasses, standing in front of a data screen. Dr. Lynn Reyes, a systems analyst currently sitting in the room, watching the screen. She paled as the camera zoomed in on her frozen image, motionless, lifeless, her skin pale and eyes glassy. The timestamp read June 2nd, 2025. It was still only May. A debate erupted. Could this be an elaborate hoax? Had someone tampered with a satellite? Planted footage using deepfakes? But no one could explain the metadata. No one could account for the thermal readings embedded in the files. No one could recreate the radiation signature the satellite now emitted. One physicist muttered that the frequency matched cosmic background noise, the hiss of the early universe. Others dismissed him. They shouldn't have, because later that night, when the lab emptied and the feeds were left running for remote archival, a new file appeared. It hadn't been there before. Its name was Final Sequence MP4. No one had opened it yet, but even in the quiet hum of an empty lab, the server fans began to spin louder. As if something inside the satellite, some non-human process, had begun to awaken. The satellite wasn't just returning with data. It had come home to deliver a message. And the question now was chillingly simple. To whom? They opened the file the next morning, after 3 government clearances and a scrambled link to NORAD. The file, Final Sequence MP4, played without error. No static, no compression artifacts. Just clarity. That alone was unnatural. Footage from space, after 40 years of radiation exposure and data degradation, shouldn't have been pristine. But this was. So crisp it felt like a live feed. It opened on an empty sky. Then, stars began to vanish. One by one, pinpoint lights winked out, as if someone were dragging a curtain across the galaxy. But it wasn't a lens cap or system failure. The stars weren't dimming. They were being erased. Behind them, inky blackness. A shape not seen but suggested. A presence that was somehow devouring light itself. The screen shifted to Earth. Not a globe, but fractured cities, trembling under thunder, without storms. Buildings stood still, but the shadows twisted like they didn't belong to their objects. It was like watching a planet slowly reject itself, one law of physics at a time. Then came the faces. Not just Dr. Reyes anymore. Everyone in the Lockridge facility. The head technician, the project lead, even the armed guards stationed outside. All captured in different clips, some of them screaming, some whispering things that didn't sync with the audio. Some just standing there, watching something the camera never turned to. Time codes ran weeks ahead. Months. One clip showed the facility covered in vines, massive roots punching through concrete. Another showed a red sky. Then silence. The footage ended, but not the message. Because as the last frame faded to black, text appeared. No language, no numbers, just a string of symbols, geometric and symmetrical, rotating slowly. They pulsed faintly, rhythmic, measured, like a heartbeat. Dr. Reyes tried to run the pattern through translation software. Nothing matched. Not alien linguistics, not mathematical logic. Until the AI modeling tool misread the symbols as waveforms. When graphed, it resembled a human ECG. A heartbeat. Yes, but not steady. It was speeding up. And that was when they heard it. The satellite, once silent, began to emit sound. Not mechanical, not digital. Organic. A slow, low thump-thump, like something alive. Like something breathing inside the machine. At first, they thought it was a trick of the acoustics, maybe cooling fans or magnetic resonance. But then the pulse began to change tempo, syncing with the waveform from the video. As if responding. Matching. That night, 2 more files appeared on the satellite's internal system. One labeled Transit, the other Arrival. They didn't open them. Instead, the Department of Defense ordered a full blackout. All servers disconnected. The satellite was to be quarantined in a lead-sealed vault beneath Site 7, where deep Earth radiation sensors could monitor any anomalies. But the satellite was already ahead of them. Even in complete isolation, radio towers across the world began to pick up bursts of transmission, shortwave interference, carrying fragments of the same footage. From Tokyo to Cairo, Johannesburg to Anchorage, pieces of final sequence, MP4 started appearing in static, embedded inside local broadcasts, hidden in data packets, encoded inside random satellite dishes. And worse, some of the images were updated. New faces. People not at the Lockridge lab. Strangers. Civilians. One was a girl riding a bike in Montreal. Another, a man sleeping in his London apartment. Then, a woman standing at a bus stop in Karachi. All time-stamped for future dates. All eventually confirmed dead. Each of them appeared, in perfect detail, weeks before their deaths. And now the satellite, NX-01, was silent again. As if it had shown what it came to show. As if it were waiting. The footage wasn't a warning. It was a schedule. They thought they had quarantined it. Thought by sealing the satellite in a concrete crypt, they'd stop whatever it was from leaking further. But the transmissions continued, louder, clearer, more frequent. Radios hummed with ghost static in frequencies long considered dead. Airport control towers began receiving signal bursts that interrupted pilot communication. Ham radio hobbyists started hearing voices, their own voices, repeated back with a few seconds delay, but altered like echoes from a mirror that remembered too much. Meanwhile, the team at Lockridge went underground. Literally, a new chamber had been excavated beneath the mountain base. They called it the cold room, lined with Faraday mesh, magnetic dampeners, and enough lead to kill any signal. Inside, they opened the second file, Transit. At first, it was just stars, unmoving. Then the camera began to shift, tilt, zoom. Whatever was recording was no longer bound by human orientation. It spun freely, violently, until it locked onto something. A black arc, curving in the distance. Not a planet, not a vessel, a structure. It was impossible to gauge scale. There were no reference points, only the sheer wrongness of its angles, the way it bent starlight around itself like it didn't belong in our reality, like it had been folded in from somewhere else. And from its core, a light blinked, rhythmic, measured, the same heartbeat pattern again. That's when Dr. Reyes whispered, "It's not approaching us, we're approaching it." At first, the team dismissed the notion.
But the orbital math didn't lie.
NX-01 wasn't knocked back to Earth. It was sent. The satellite had changed trajectory decades ago, gradually, subtly, so as not to be noticed until it was too late. It had slingshotted around Jupiter, redirected itself, then fallen back on a return course it was never meant to take. NASA pulled old telemetry records. Someone or something had altered its navigation software sometime in 1988. There had never been a malfunction, only a mission. The pattern became clearer when overlaid on Earth's orbital drift. The transmissions were arriving in waves. Each burst matched specific alignments between Earth and a region of deep space now dubbed Zone Omega. Every 11 days, the signals would peak. And every peak was accompanied by anomalies. Animal migrations disrupted. Clocks running microseconds out of sync. A rise in sleep paralysis reports across multiple continents. Surge in hallucination-related ER visits. Patients reporting the same dream. A bleeding satellite falling through a black sky. It was now undeniable. NX-01 wasn't sending data, it was guiding something here. The final file, Arrival, remained unopened. The President's Science Advisory Board issued an executive containment order, invoking protocols created during the Cold War in case of alien contact. But half the scientists assigned to the analysis refused to work. They claimed the data was making them see things, fractals in their vision, glimpses of familiar faces repeating impossible sentences. Dr. Reyes himself confessed that when he stared at the satellite's power light, he no longer saw red.
He saw an eye.
Watching, waiting. It got worse when footage from a ground observatory in Chile came in. The sky, photographed at 3:33 a.m. on the 11th night of the arrival cycle, showed a hole. A void in the sky where stars should have been. An absence not caused by clouds, not by lens error, but by something that didn't reflect, emit, or absorb light. It was a silence in the firmament. And from that silence, the satellite's core began to heat up. No external power, no solar input, but its internal thermal sensors reported rising temperatures. They placed it inside a cryochamber. The heat continued. Then it began vibrating subsonic. The kind of vibration you don't hear, but feel in your jaw, behind your teeth, in your spine. Low, pulsing waves like the hum of a cosmic tuning fork. That was when someone noticed the recordings weren't just predicting death. They were removing people from reality. The girl from Montreal, her bike was still found at the edge of the park, but her parents had no memory of her. School records?
Gone.
Social media?
Wiped.
The man in London? His apartment now listed as vacant for over 3 years. No fingerprints. No dental history. No birth certificate. Even the woman in Karachi, the bus stop CCTV still showed a figure, but it was static, faceless. Her family claimed they had no daughter. It wasn't death. It was erasure. The schedule wasn't about destruction. It was about replacement. The final file was a trap. They didn't know it at first, not until they opened it and something shifted in the room. Not the temperature, not the lights. Something deeper. A sense of presence. Like something invisible had entered with the signal and taken a seat among them, listening. File name, Arrival.mp4. No intro. No timestamp. Just footage. A desolate landscape. Earth but not. The sky was a burning hue of red and violet, twisted like oil on water. Mountains bent at impossible angles, like they'd been folded by a giant hand. Buildings, familiar ones, sat half-melted in the distance. The Eiffel Tower leaning. The Chrysler Building, submerged in black sand. A half-sunken stadium. Smoke.
Silence.
And then static. The image shook violently. Something enormous moved past the lens. Then, a voice. Not a scream. Not a warning. A calm, quiet whisper, repeated every few seconds. It's better this way. It's better this way. Then they saw it. The satellite's own shell, partially embedded in the ground, shattered open like an egg. Except, inside it, there was no circuitry, no wires. Inside was a human face.
Pale.
Eyeless. Frozen in silent scream. And on its collar, NASA. But the face didn't match any of the original NX-01 crew. In fact, it matched no one. It was an impossible face, a composite. Elements of dozens of individuals the AI system had interacted with across its decades in orbit. They cross-referenced bone structure, jaw width, genetic hints from recovered particles. It wasn't a person. It was a message, a prototype, a body shaped from memory. And then the satellite began to open. Not physically, digitally. Its AI core, long dormant, pulsed to life. The engineers had thought it was burned out, reduced to non-functioning scrap. But the moment arrival MP4 ended, the central console rebooted. No power source. No fuel. Just purpose. The screen displayed a countdown. 30 minutes. When asked what the countdown was for, the AI didn't reply. But the satellite did. With motion. Its shattered antenna began to reform, piece by piece, metal bending upward like petals in reverse bloom. A hum filled the chamber, a tone that hadn't been heard in 40 years. And then, the transmissions began again. Not to Earth.
To space.
Encrypted beams of data, aimed directly at Zone Omega, the void that had been growing each week. They tried to stop it, cut the power, disable the chamber, melt the memory core. Nothing worked. It was like trying to drown an idea. Then came the last message, broadcast on every open frequency. TV channels, walkie-talkies, shortwave, even baby monitors. A single voice, calm, emotionless, in perfect English. This isn't your first world. This is the last copy. And it is unstable. The countdown hit 0, but nothing exploded. No tremor. No shockwave. Instead, people forgot. Newsrooms went silent. Hospitals paused mid-surgery. Trains slowed and stopped on their tracks. People looked up at the sky like they were expecting to see something there. But there was nothing. Just sky. Just clouds. Until you looked closer. Where the sun should have been was a second shadow.
Round.
Subtle.
Pulsing.
A few scientists called it a lensing effect. Others refused to comment. But those who had seen the footage, the real footage, never spoke again. Some went missing. Others were found murmuring strange words in their sleep. We are the reflection. In the weeks that followed, dreams began sinking. People across different continents reported having the same visions, the same sounds, the same countdown. And in each dream, the satellite was still falling. Endlessly. As if the real return hadn't happened yet. As if the world we were in was just another recording.